The Life Outdoors radio show with Nate Bailey. Everything you need to know about hunting Southern Oregon. Wake the wild within.
Hey guys, I'm going to apologize for my voice today. I'm running behind with a cold, so the content's going to be well worth listening to. So if my voice is even a little bit crackly, it's worth it, because I'm going to talk a little bit about some 5 takeaways that I have from elk seasons past. That's hunting elk with my barebow for the last, since the early 90 or late 90s. So there's 5 takeaways that I have. These are kind of some problems that I had over and over, and once I got these out of my system, that's when we started becoming pretty successful at this. Some of the 5 things that I've learned over the years elk hunting with my barebow, and it's elk hunting with a bow is kind of intimidating from the get-go. I'll never forget the first bull I called in, and I didn't shoot. I didn't even draw back on him, and he came in. He was within easily 16 yards, and I killed a lot of rabbits by then with my bow at 16 yards. But for some reason, I just got it in my head that bows were something that you could kill big old monster animals with. And I think it's because I was around so many rifle hunters all my, earlier years, and a lot of those guys did not understand what a bow does compared to a rifle. And they sat and watched people hit elk, 3 or 4 times with 300 Win Mags and still have to go track that elk and dispatch it sometimes. So they were really skeptical about how bows work. It wasn't until I started getting around some other folks that, and Larry Jones videos. I mean, Larry Jones Elk Fever was a big motivator for me to pick up the bow and go after elk. But it was one of those things that it was very intimidating at first. And I had Larry Jones, and that was about it. I didn't have a whole lot of mentors as far as how to kill elk. We had Traditional Bowhunter magazine. I read a lot about TJ. David Peterson, Elkhart, was early on. You guys probably have never even heard of him. He killed a lot of elk in Colorado, and he did it completely different than what I do now. I mean, I tried his way for quite a while, and that didn't work out for me. I think it worked out well for him, but it didn't work out for me. And I see guys still, thinking that they're going to hunt elk on that way. And what he did is he'd listen to bugles, and then he'd sneak in and then just stalk them as they were bugling, or stalk them as he knew where they were. And he very rarely did any kind of calling at all. I am the exact opposite. I call my head off. And so that's the first thing that I'm going to call to your attention. So I'll tell you what the 5 things are. And then we'll come back and talk about each one of those things. The first thing is charge bugles, and I'll explain that. I charge all bugles now. Second is get into position, and I'll explain that. That's something that traditional bow hunters have a really hard time doing, especially guys that hunt a lot of deer, and I'll explain that when we come back to it. Pick the right time to draw. That is probably one of the hardest things for a traditional guy to figure out. I've seen so many trad guys get within elk, within shooting distance of elk, and then not draw because they're afraid they're going to get picked up. And you will. Most time you're going to get picked out when you draw, but that's not that big of a problem. And then 4 is shoot. Pick that shot, or pick that spot and shoot. And then number 5 is practice with less technology. So this is going to be something for barebows or the gap shooters out there. I've been around some guys that have shot quite a few different types of technology, and that technology got in the way for them a couple times. So let's go back up to chasing bugles. Okay, so early on, that's really what got me into bow hunting. My uncles would bugle elk during rifle season, and I just thought it was cool as all get out. And then once I figured out that, man, these elk are getting within really close, we could start bow hunting them. And that was one of the big things that took me to bow hunting, was bugling. So early on, I started bugling early on. I had a Jones call, Larry Jones call with the metal reed in it. If any of you guys have ever blown one of those things, I don't know if I could blow it now. I'd probably get a headache so bad. But you blow it so hard, and it made good elk sounds. But it blew so hard that you'd get a headache after, 30 minutes of blowing that thing. And there were no grunts or anything else along with it. Now, you could screw it out and use it as a grunt tube. Larry Jones knew that. He did it a lot. I did not know that. I listened to his tape a lot, but I didn't understand exactly what that meant until I started getting a few bulls close by. And so that was one of the things that we did a lot. I'll never forget, I was in the Cascades, one of the first Cascade bulls I called in. And that was, I by then I'd moved on to Carlton's mouth reeds, and that was a whole new thing for me. Once I got into the mouth reeds, I never ever had a bugle again. I take that back. I did have a Terminator, but beyond the Terminator, I never had a bugle that you put a call on the end of again. And I was up in the Cascades in a place that was pretty well traveled. I mean, people would go up there and pick huckleberries in August, and then about the time the huckleberries kind of started drying up, that's when the rut started kicking in. But still, there was a lot of people around in that area during most of the time, and I got into quite a few animals in there. I'll never forget, one evening I was in there and I started bugling, and I heard what I know now was an elk just raking he's raking the crap out of a tree, and I didn't know what it was. And I was thinking, man, it started getting dark, and I was thinking, man, I better get out of here. I don't know what that is. Excuse me. And anyhow, I came back in the next morning and went in there and bugled, and he bugled. I mean, I couldn't even get my full bugle out, and he cut me off and bugled back. And it was one bugle, and I heard him coming. And so I got myself kind of situated underneath this fir tree, and I was in the front of it, and this big 6-point. And if you guys haven't seen a good Cascade bull, it's like a big Roosevelt with the antlers of a big old dark horned Rocky Mountain. So like a Rocky Mountain that's been rubbing on, the sap of a little fir tree. So they're really black horned. Most all of the Cascade bulls that I've ever been around have those real dark black horns. And he came up there in his ivory tips, and I was in awe. I was in total awe that this was a bull. I thought it was a person, and I called in a lot of people before this, and that he was walking broadside for probably all the way around that tree. Nothing in between me and him for the whole time that he walked around me. And he walked around me in probably 270 degrees looking for me. And when I blew the bugle in the first place, I blew it uphill. So I did not have it straight at him. So he thought I was still up the hill. It was a perfect shooting situation. If he gave me that shot now, I would have been eating backstrap that night. But as he's walking around the tree, I was so amazed. I don't know what was going through my head, but I forgot that I was totally able to shoot him. I forgot that I was actually hunting. I was just so flabbergasted by this big bull coming in and walking around me, and I kept thinking, man, I could kill that bull. But it never dawned on me that I could kill that bull. So I hate to tell these stories about myself, but this is things that you're going to go through. I guarantee you're going to go through this. If you've never called in a bull before, it's one of those things. Maybe you will. Maybe you'll get a hold of yourself. Matter of fact, I just put on the back of my bow a sticker that says "Pick a Spot," and I'm going to start selling those so people can get put those on their bow. So maybe it'll kick their brain back into going, I can shoot this. Pick a spot, shoot. And because that's one of the hardest things that I found out about elk hunting is when the moment of truth comes, is remembering to shoot the thing. because you get so jacked up and you enjoy it so much, and you've almost feel like you've won by just calling him in. And unless you've done this before, and I mean calling him into trad bow range, calling him into 50 yards is still like, to me, it's like, nah, I'm still not there yet. We're close, but I'm still not there yet. I haven't won. But the minute that he gets into trad bow range, there's a big like letdown, like, oh man, I just won. So, but there's still stuff left to do if you want to eat steaks. So that's one of the big things with trad bows, is make sure that once you get one within trad bow range, that you do shoot him. So that little sticker, I think, is going to help me remember that. I still to this day have to tell myself, shoot him. You know, if you guys saw, I didn't get to bow hunt last year for elk, but if you guys saw the year before, that was never did actually cross my mind. I did get a poor hit on that bull, but that was not because of anything. It was because he whirled right at the time. I probably should have shot him frontal rather than trying to wait for him. And it was a timing issue too. I could have timed him, let him go past me, and then shot him quartering away, which is what I should have done. But it is what it is. So that's the first thing, is charge bugles. Don't listen to the guys that say, oh, elk don't bugle anymore. I listened to that for too many years, for probably about 10 years, and I snuck in on a lot of bulls, and I listened to a lot of bulls bugle, and I didn't bugle back at them, and I will never, ever, 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 ever do that again, because elk bugle. And I don't care if you're bugling at them and they're walking away from you, just keep following them. They're doing that because they're following the lead cow, and she's going to go bed down somewhere. You got to understand that elk are a matriarchal? Yeah, matriarchal herd. The males really don't dictate what goes on. It's that lead cow that dictates what goes on. Of course, he's going to push them around and try to keep them rounded up. But if she's wanting to go bed down somewhere, he's going to follow him, and he's going to go bed down with them. So understand that. Also, scream at them. Pretend like you're an elk. Be loud. Beat up things as you go through there. If they don't hear you acting like an elk, then they're not going to pay attention to you as an elk. They hear a lot of bugles, man. And you got to, if you're going to get an elk within trad bow range, you've got to act like an elk. And you know, you can get away with a lot of things. The one thing that you cannot get away with is your wind. You just got to make sure that you keep your wind right. And if you got that wind right, you can, and you try to go out of your way to make noise. I even shake trees to where I know that the elk can see that tree, the bull, and he's hearing me up there. And if I'm starting to rake on stuff, I'll shake trees as I'm raking them, because that's, if you watch elk, that's what they do. So that's the first thing. I could ramble on about calling forever because it's one of my favorite things to do. The second thing is get into position. If you guys watch 2020, we had, I think it's called Bugled Brawl for 4 hours with a bull. It's on the Life Outdoors YouTube channel. If you guys haven't seen it, go over, check that out. And what I'm talking about is exactly what happened as we were chasing that bull down. Kevin, who's never even been into elk until that season. He actually never saw an elk in the wild until that season, and then he was on one, I think, every day he went out. But anyhow, as we were coming down, he set up once, and that's one thing that we don't do, is we don't really ever set up and call. We're calling on the move. So once we get down to a spot where I think I should call again, I just have the shooter set to where if that bull turns around and comes back to us, that he could shoot. And I try to set those things up as we're going. It's a very fluid thing, and you got to be around a lot of elk to figure out how to do it. I can't explain it completely. The one thing I can say is if you're coming up to a clearing, make sure the shooter's on the opposite side of the clearing as the caller. Make sure the caller is on the back side, because elk will come up to the edge of that clearing, and if they don't see another elk, they're going to stall on that edge. So if you have the shooter on that side, it works pretty good. But I see too many people coming up on the edges of these clearings, and they're both together, and the elk comes up on the opposite side, and they're like, oh, there he is. And it's like 150 yards out, and that elk just sits over there and watches. That's happened to me several times before I got my knuckleheaded ideas and started thinking, wait a second, he's not coming because he can't see another elk across that clearing, and he knows there should be one over on the other side. And then that's another thing is bulls, when they start bugling like that, they're usually letting themselves be seen too, because part of what they want to do, they don't really want to fight. What they want to do is they want to intimidate, and that's because if they fight, there's a chance of them not making it through the rut all the way, or they don't really want to fight. And so you got to understand that about them. They're being aggressive, but they're not being so aggressive. It's mostly about bluffs. It's like a lot of guys in bars, if you think about it. These guys are always yelling at each other, puffing their chest out, giving each other dirty looks and stuff. But it very, very rarely does it come down to a fight.
Hunting Southern Oregon. The Life Outdoors radio show on Gold Country Radio with Nate Bailey. Keep it tuned right here for more ways to perfect your craft. Coming up next, Wake the Wild Within.
Want to get your business noticed? Sponsor a show on KKFO Gold Country Radio on 103.3 FM and create awareness through on-air announcements, our online stream at goldcountryradio.org, and our podcasts that live on forever. Your message reaches a broad local audience while also targeting listeners who choose to tune in to the shows they love. Plus, we promote your sponsorship across our website and social media. For more information, email goldcountryradio@gmail.com. Call 541-238-6989 or visit goldcountryradio.org. Gold Country Radio, your message heard locally and beyond.
The Life Outdoors radio show with Nate Bailey. Everything you need to know about hunting Southern Oregon. Wake the Wild Within.
That's kind of the setup. Now, one of the things that you'll see in that video is Kevin was right in the middle of a bush. And I came down there as we were moving down. I said, can you shoot from there? And he looked around. He's like, yeah. And then he started looking around. He couldn't even draw in there. There was no way he could have shot from that bush. And the reason I know this is because I did that to myself several times. So use your camouflage, stand in front of the bush. And if you feel like you're going to be seen, put some face paint on and cover up your hands and make sure that you got a lot of good camo. I think that actually helps you think that you're not going to get seen. It doesn't take very much for an elk. They don't pick you out very well. If you look through the woods and you just start looking at people in the woods, if you have somebody standing still there up against a tree that has dull colors on, doesn't even have to have camouflage completely, but has dull colors on, and just look, it's hard to pick them out. The biggest thing is movement and things like that. But at the same time, painting your face and all that stuff will make you even that much better at not being seen. That's why you wear camouflage. So if you set up, say we're coming down the hill, and I say, go up there 50 yards, and I'm going to be back here 50 yards, and then get yourself set for a shot, that means be on the other side of the tree, not on the back side. You do not want to be on the back side of the tree. You won't get a shot through there. I've had more elk come in running to me, and I'd not being able to get just all I could do is sit there and watch them. One time I was in the Cascades again. The Cascades are actually my favorite place to hunt elk. I was in the Cascades, and I was in this little marshy section, and it was lined by alders, and it just had like bowling alleys in between these alders. And so there are like 3 alleys in between the alders. And I actually didn't even call it this bull. I was just walking up there, and the bulls heard my footsteps as I was going through the sloshy, marshy stuff, and he bugled at me. Being a young hunter, oh, wow, an elk bugled. I need to bugle back. Well, I didn't even pay attention to what I'd done, where I was. So I just ripped out a bugle, and that elk, he didn't answer me. He just came running. And as he's running, he was on the opposite lane as I was. So we had a bunch of alders in between us. And he came, and he ran straight to me and stopped. And I could look at him through the alders. He could look at me through the alders too. He couldn't see. He was looking for an elk. He couldn't see me. Back in those days, I had my camouflage spot on. But he he stopped right there and started looking down towards me, and he was not. I could hear his breathing, and he was probably not 15 feet away, just on the other side of the alders. But I couldn't do anything. I couldn't step around the alders. I couldn't do anything. I put myself in a bad spot before I even bugled. Just think about those things. You know, if an elk bugles at you, you don't have to answer right then and there. Matter of fact, unless you cut that elk off, don't answer him right then and there. Make him think, what in the heck was that? And then get yourself into a spot to where you think you could get a good shooting lane, and then give him an answer. And then on that second answer, if he answers you back, cut him off. And that's usually will get him coming. So that's the best thing that I could give you is make sure that you are not behind a tree. And then also, if you do get yourself stuck behind a tree, Gage did this, get yourself stuck behind a tree a little bit, and all it takes is 1 or 2 steps to get around that tree to take a shot, do it. What's the worst that's going to happen? You can spook that elk off, and he's going to stop, and he's going to take off. But if you do, and I didn't put this in my notes, but I should have, always, even the shooter, always have a diaphragm in your mouth when the elk are coming in. Make a couple steps around that tree. If he spins, they'll usually spin and move. And 9 times out of 10, if you give them if you give them a cow call right there, they will stop. And it gives them that second that you could draw and release an arrow. That right there has killed more elk than any other instance. If you watch even the compound guys, just that stop like that, that's when they kill more elk than any other time. So you could get away with that. You could get around a tree. He's going to see your movement. He probably won't put 2 and 2 together unless he smells you, and then of course the game over. He's going to not stop. But you come around that tree, drawing as you come around. Once he spins and takes off and you're clear, give him a big cow call and let her fly. I'm telling you, it works. It works good. All right. Number 3, draw. Same thing. A lot of trad guys get those elk within a certain range, especially guys that have hunted with compounds before, because a lot of guys will pull on that compound before the elk even gets in there, and they'll just hold it until he gets there. It's one of the advantages of a compound. But you can hunt that without having to do that. You could actually draw while he's looking straight at you. I've done it before. And what's the worst that's going to happen? He's going to walk off. If he's really close and he puts his head down to start walking off and just walk off, you could draw then and then, get him as he's going away. But 9 times out of 10, they go back the same direction they came. And the reason they do that is because they know it was safe behind them. So before he whirls and takes off, you draw. If he starts moving on you, give him a cow call real quick. That'll stop him in the whirl, and then you just slip that right in behind his shoulder. Make sure that you draw. You're never going to kill an elk unless you draw. and trad guys have a problem with this because they're right out in the open, and they understand that these elk are going to try to get away from them, and if they draw, it's going to be a problem. Another thing is now shoot. And I'm going to say this tongue-in-cheek. This is the reason that I use heavy arrows and single-bladed broadheads and single bevels, is make sure you're picking a killing angle, but not every angle is going to be a broadside angle. Matter of fact, most aren't. So you're going to have to get that through in your head that you take the shot. If it's a killing angle, you take that shot. And if you get into a shoulder blade or something like that, you need the equipment that's going to be able to carry you through. So the last bull I shot, I called him through this jack pine. He was on the other side of the jack pine. I walked up in there, called him back through. He came straight at me. He was probably at 10 feet when he got through. I was going to plug him right do a frontal shot, but I didn't have a whole lot of room in there, and I thought if I hit frontal, he'd run me over because he's coming right straight at me. So I waited in my mind, I'm like, I'll just wait until he turns, wait until he turns, wait until he turns. And the problem is I didn't wait long enough. Once I saw that front inside shoulder expand to where he was going to turn, I released the arrow and caught him in the mid of turn, and it caught him far back and at an angle away from the vitals. But it did. It went all the way through, and it busted the socket on the outgoing side. So it busted his rear leg on that backside. And that would not happen. I don't care how close you are. If I was shooting a 400 grain arrow or a 3-blade, those kind of shots would probably stick in the bone or glance off, or even get stuck in the paunch. So use big, heavy arrows. If you're elk hunting, you could switch back and forth between that and your deer and your antelope setup. But elk, you get them so close that it just makes sense to shoot a heavy arrow, because then you got everything in your advantage. Yeah, the one thing is you're not going to be shooting 40 yards, but I have very rarely had an elk stand back at 40 yards where I could have killed him. Just one that I could think of. If I was able to shoot longer, I could have got him. But man, I'm telling you guys, you got to shoot. And I'm not telling you to take stupid shots. There's got to be a angle there, a killing angle. I call it a killing angle. So if he's quartering to you, you got to be able to hit lung and heart. So, not a heavy quarter to you. If he's coming straight on, you got to be able to put it in that soccer ball sized hole in the thoracic void in there, where there's a void that right between their chest and their neck, and that'll go right straight down into the lungs and the heart. Or let him go past you, or get the perfect broadside, but that's very rare, man. A perfect broadside shot is pretty rare when you're calling elk, especially. And then quartering away, of course, you shoot further back, but it's got to be those killing angles. If you don't have that killing angle, you just don't shoot. That's just the way it is. If that arrow is going to hit the ham going in, you don't shoot. You're not going to kill that elk. If you could shoot third rib back, you're going to kill that elk every time. So those are the things that you have to look for. A lot of people are purists. They've listened to trad guys say, "Well, I just don't want to, I don't want to injure anything," and that's true. You don't go out there to injure anything. But I know a lot of trad guys that just pass up shot after shot after shot that they could have killed 100 times over, especially if they were shooting different equipment. Shooting a heavy cedar arrow with a good single blade, rather than shooting, back in the day we were shooting some super light aluminums with 3 blades, and yeah, those things just don't carry near the momentum. But that's probably one of the biggest things that I see with trad guys is they just don't shoot. And the fifth and last thing, and let me go back to the fourth. I'm not advocating going out and just flinging arrows, okay? Understand that. I'm not doing that. But what I am saying is, even coyotes and wolves and bears and cougars make calculated risk. And what I'm saying about that is you got to try. You got to try to kill that animal, or you're never going to kill one. If you're just waiting for that broadside shot, it's going to be one every 10 years. And I don't know about you, but that's a hard time to hunt in the Elkwoods for one in every 10 years. All right. I think I've touched that enough. Number 5, and this is the last one. Practice with less technology. Now, I know you gap shooters out there are using your rangefinders and things like this, but the problem is you'll get too stuck on that. When it comes down to flinging arrows, it becomes pretty primal. It becomes to where you are now a predator, just like a bear, a cougar, or a wolf. And if you have it set in your mind that you have to have that rangefinder after you get an arrow in an animal, to get another arrow in him, or to track him down, or to push and get more arrows in, you're probably going to lose an animal. I watched it happen, and it wasn't with a trad guy. It was a compound guy. That animal was he shot him high, shot a bull high, and went through gut. We knew it went through gut. The bull was bleeding just a little bit. We only found like 2 drops of blood, but we went up. We gave him an hour, and he walked off. We watched the bull walk off, and he walked off about 100 yards. We went up there, checked his arrow, and then looked up the hill 100 yards, and that bull was standing there, and he'd been standing there that whole time. Well, the guy couldn't get another shot off. He was so stuck on trying to get a good range, and I just kept saying, shoot him at 60. Just put one in him. Just keep throwing arrows at him. And I had my bow on my back, or else I should have took my bow off and just started flinging arrows. Once you put an arrow in an animal, all bets are off. I don't care if that animal's 250 yards and you can still get an arrow in it. You still try to get an arrow in it. We ended up not getting that bull. I know it died, but we ended up not getting him. And, and that's a bad thing. It's something that we all hate. It's something that isn't good. But at the same time, if we are a part of this world of the natural order of things, that bull did not go to waste, for one. For two, we're a part of the natural order, and we're no less a part than a cougar or a bear that had a elk get away from them. So, yeah, it's not a good thing. Yeah, we're humans. We have, this ethics in us, and we don't like seeing stuff like that happen. But we also got to realize that we are part of something that is very primal. And I'm on a soapbox here, but I'm going to continue on it. And quite honestly, any other human that gives you big problems over that, like 90% of humans eat meat. So they're giving you problems over something that they don't even know anything about because they haven't even faced it yet. They are still eating the product of that thing, that primal thing of taking life. And it's something that is spiritual. It's something that people really need to start thinking about when they're hunting. But at the same time, do not rely on that technology. I don't care what it takes to once you've made that decision. It's about shedding blood, and it's about killing that animal as quick as you can. You owe it to the animal, and you owe it to yourself, and you owe it to your family to kill that thing as quick as you can so you can preserve the meat, put the animal out of its misery, and so you can have the meat. So remember that. Don't rely on your technology. Don't rely on if you get an arrow in an animal and all you can get is a half draw to put another arrow in, do it. We've lost that in our society because we've figured out that we have to do things a certain way, and we got to have FOC, and we got to have 28 inches of draw, and we have to have perfect back tension, and then if we have perfect back tension, and if our hand flies off our face, we're plucking the string, and all these things go out the door when that primal thing turns on about the hunting. And trust me about this, you guys, if you do not start thinking about this side of things, you're never going to shoot elk. You're never going to shoot. You're just going to continue to worry about all the things that you've been taught, and not just technology, but like proper form and all of that. Your form should be good just by shooting a lot in muscle memory. But what I'm saying is if you can't shoot laying on your back, or if you can't shoot sitting down, if you can't shoot canted off one end or the other, and you have to have a perfect back tension, or say your back's against a tree and you can't shoot, you got to practice that stuff. Practice some half draws. And I would never shoot an animal at half draw to start, but when you start getting arrows and things, you better darn well get very primal and get that animal on the ground. So, these are the 5 things, you guys, and they sound pretty simple, but this, I'm telling you right now, this is the little things that move you from becoming a hunter to a killer. And we've all been there. We all need to understand this about these things, but at the same time, these are the things that I've learned over the years that, and I'm trying to pass on to our kids. And I think they're good things to sit and meditate on before the season. These are the things to meditate on before the season. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully that gets you guys creative juices going, understanding what's going on with your own psyche and your mindset, because there's a whole lot more to this hunting thing than releasing an arrow. It's more about you and how you are going to conduct yourself, and it's a very spiritual, deep thing. So we're going to continue to bring these podcasts to you until elk season, man. I am going to load you guys up with the stuff that I know. Leave in the comments, and I'll try to go through the comments if you have any questions. Also, you can go to Barebow Hunter group on Facebook and leave questions there. You can leave questions on the YouTube channel. You can get a hold of me on Instagram. I got Nate at Barebow Hunter on Instagram, and leave me some questions, and I'd love to try to answer those questions. And I'm not the end-all, be-all of elk hunting. It's just I've been around a lot of it, and I've seen a lot of it. And I've seen a lot of guys, and I've messed up a lot, and I have let a lot of elk walk that should have died, and I've taught a lot of people. And so the minute that I got those people started to where they got through these things, these are the five things, and they started being around some elk, that's when you started seeing some elk hitting the ground with us on the YouTube channel. Before that, you saw a lot of elk, right? You saw a lot of elk that were being called in, and guys just weren't killing them. But these guys have worked through this stuff too, and now they're starting to kill them. So anyhow, hope that helps. Don't forget to go over to Patreon and get entered into that elk call. You're going to want that thing this year. All right, until then, you guys shoot straight, and can't wait for this elk season.
Thanks for listening to the Life Outdoors radio show. Tune in next Sunday evening at 7 p.m. to continue to hone the primitive skills that man has always been meant to master. Hunting Southern Oregon. The Life Outdoors radio show with Nate Bailey. Wake the wild within.